and you have to upload.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you to the moderator that gave me the permission to uh, showing and present my seminar about the influence of adding the certain humor in learning during a pandemic on the understanding of elementary school students. Okay, my name is Zelina Rahmalia and I will serve the first chapter. So this is the background why I chose this title. Massive changes in activity have occurred on the time since the emergence of the virus called COVID-19. This virus is contagious and is spreading throughout the world. To combat this, the government is trying to impose large-scale restrictions to reduce the rate of transmission of the virus. As a result, new obstacles emerge in the midst of a pandemic in all fields. The regularity of society and activities that are usually routine carried out have become chaotic in all fields. So, including affecting the flow of education. All school activities are limited, so students can only study at home. However, this actually raises new problems that are detrimental, both on the part of teachers and students. For example, learning is too monotonous. Teacher interaction with and between students is limited. Learning is not effective, and so on. Therefore, teacher must be as creative as possible to create effective and fun learning. For example, by introducing humor, making learning fun is a challenge for a teacher, especially if learning is carried out online. Due to limited interaction and space, students get bored easily. So student is not effective. Learning is not effective. This is in line with the opinion of Anugraha in 2020. He said many students experience boredom and boredom studying online, so that sometimes they answer questions carelessly. So answer random question based on Anugraha's opinion above. That what I mentioned also shows that students are both during learning online learning. Monotonous learning because students only focus on their cell phone or laptop camera to the levels of saturations. Therefore, teachers can make learning more interesting and fun by adding humor when teaching. So Larry W. Hodges argues that a sense of humor has been found to be related to positive affective experience. Fun activities, including learning, are always related to positive things. This is in accordance with the opinions above that I said before. The right humor will increase a person's dopamine hormone, so students are happier when studying. The right humor will increase the person's dopamine hormone, so students are more happier. Like what I said today, last minute ago. Someone tends to understand something more easily if they like the. Therefore, humor is a very important to increase the effectiveness of students' learning. So based on the research that has been done, the researchers have concluded that mindfulness on the learning causes students to feel bored. Due to various factors, students are easily distracted during learning. Therefore, humor plays an important role in creating a pleasant learning atmosphere. So that is easy for students to understand. That's why I use this title based on that background. So the effect of inserting humor in learning during the pandemic on the understanding of elementary school students. So next, I found the problem and formulated based on the description that I have mentions. The formulation of the problem in this study is how the effect of adding or inserting humor in learning during a pandemic on elementary students understand. To be more particular on the problem in the study, teachers need to detail the problem as follows. For the first is how to overcome students' boredom during online and offline learning. Second is what are the methods, models, media, or methods that teacher can use to make learning fun for students during online and offline learning. And for the third is how is the looking through the additions or insertions of humor to the activeness of online and offline learning. So based on that, we can conclude that research purpose is for the first is how to overcome students' boredom during online and offline learning. And what are the methods, models, media, or methods that teacher can use to make learning fun for students during online and offline learning? And the last is how is the influence of fun learning through the additions or insertion of humor to the activeness of online and offline learning? So the benefits or the advantages of my research. For the first is for researchers. This research is expected to add insight and knowledge of researches about making learning more fun by inserting humor during learning. For teacher, this research is expected to increase the the effectiveness of and quality of learning both offline and online by inserting humor and when teaching. For student itself, this research is expected to increase the effectiveness of learning that affects learning outcomes because teacher management increases comfort and fun learning through humor. Next, for school principals, it can be used as a reference in improving learning management that will be applied in the elementary school, the lead and the writing knowledge. And the last, for other researchers, it can be used as a reference for conducting research. So I just served chapter 1 and chapter 3, but I want to show you about theoretical framework of my research. The success obtained by students can be seen from changes in behavior in students after participating in learning process, namely changes from not knowing to knowing, excited when learning, responding to humorous jokes, changes in habits and the ability to respect others, and the development of social and emotional attitudes. To assess the success of the learning process, one of them can be assessed through the addition or insertion of human in the learning process. Humor is something that is funny and tickles students through words. Humor can be used in learning as a form of students' motivation. The teacher's sense of humor makes learning more fun. The learning atmosphere is more enthusiastic to show learning activity so that the learning objective can be achieved. The stages of comparative casual research that in order for humor to be effective in the classroom, the steps that must be taken are as follows. For the first is identification of problem. The problem that the researchers want to identify is the boredom of students when learning during a pandemic due to monotonous learning and other influencing factors than the effect of adding humor of learning during a pandemic. Next, the group wants to be researched. The group I want to study is the population of a sample of students who experience boredom during learning pandemic. Then the teacher's role in overcoming this is by adding humor to the process. Comparisons group. The group that functions as a comparison is a class where the teacher applies humor during the learning process. And data collections. The data collection technique that I use is through library research and data analysis. After doing a literature study, it turns out that the effect of adding humor to learning activities during the pandemic, both offline or online, was found. And next, I will serve about chapter 3. That's about research methods. For the first is research settings. First point is research place because I just found data through the internet, so the research location hasn't determined because it's only preparation of the proposal plan. However, there are factors supporting research in school selection. Namely, for the first is monotonous learning is still commonly found in elementary school. And next is teacher is in schools who are willing to accept educational innovations the school has set in the 2013 curriculum. I'm sorry for this because I capacity twice. For the next is research subject. The subjects of this study were students. This subject was chosen because the learning found in the students was still low. This subject, I have explained this because apart from several factors, one of the main factors comes from the teacher and the learning situations. To overcome this, fun learning was created through humor from the teacher. This research involves, for the first is students, next teacher, and the last is observer. And for the research time and length, this is also hasn't been determined because it's just making a proposal, but based on the length of time making of a proposal takes 2 weeks. Next is research design. For the first is research approach. This study uses a qualitative approach is supported because the data obtained in this study only through tracing sources from journals and books related to the research title. Next is types of research. The type of research used is causal comparative research, which is used to see the effect of humor and learning activities during the pandemic. The basic causal comparative approach involves research activities starting from identifying the effect of one variable on another variable, then looking for possible causal variables. Or in other words, in comparative causal research, the researcher tries to examine the research question. What is the effect of X? This is according to Sukardi in 2004. Comparative causal research is almost the same as correlation research, but between that two, there are small differences, namely as follow. For the first, in relational research, researchers do not identify or distinguish between independent and independent variables. Sorry before. And next, in comparative causal research, researchers seek to identify causal relationships. And in complex variable relationships, they distinguish between independent and dependent variables. This study aimed to determine the effect of adding or inserting humor in learning during a pandemic on elementary school students. Next is research flow. Broadly speaking, there are five stages to conducting this research. Namely, for the first is identifying the problem, determining the group to be studied, and next determining the comparisons group, collecting data and analyzing the data. And for the research procedure, for the first, it is identification of the problem. The problem that the researcher want to identify is for them students when learning during a pandemic due to monotonous, like what I said before. And next, the group wants to be researched, and comparison group also to control for extra variables to help ensure the quality of the two groups. This can be done for the first is there a pairing of members of the groups compares the same subgroups. For examples, high, medium, and low. Factor analysis that allows statistical comparison of independent variables and control variables together in combinations. And equating the two groups statistically by covariating the research variables. And for the data collections technique that I use is through library research, or I can research through the internet or another media that online. And for the analysis data. So after doing a literature study, it turned out that the effect of adding humor to learning activities during the pandemic offline and online was found. And for the data and data quality, for the research data, the data in this study are qualitative data. Qualitative data were obtained from a literature study carried out and theoretical studies by comparing similar cases and the success rate with the additions of humor and textbook learning during a pandemic. The data in this study related to the comparative causal steps previously mentioned and their relationship to the meaning as follows: overcoming the algorithm of stunning pandemic semester students and implementation of adding humor of learning during the pandemic, also the effectiveness of elementary students' understanding. And for the data source, this research data was collected using literature study data collection techniques. Literature study is an activity that cannot be separated from research. Almost all research requires literature or literature study, although people if often distinguish between library research and still require library research. There are many benefits of as literature study in the process of making research data. One of them is to come up with the latest research, because no research is 100% new. There will inevitably be a range of application from previous research. By studying literature research, you can look for research ideas, novelty, sharpen ideas, find suitable methods. And data source collections. Sources of data are collecting journals, articles related to predetermined variables using search engines, one of which is Google Scholar or Scopus. Next is data presentation preparations. After the data sources are collected, the researcher begins to edit and revise data according to the variable studied to support the research hypothesis. And for preparation report, I'm sorry, after the data to be presented is collected and in accordance with the variables to be studied. A report is prepared and adjusted to the guidelines for the preparation of the library research final process. So first we need to research instruments. Researchers didn't use research instrument because they didn't conduct research directly in the field. However, the instrument should The resources plans to use is the observation set. Basically, it's an explanation of observational data on the activities of teachers and students during the learning process during the pandemic fever. And in the data analysis, the data obtained in this study were analyzed using qualitative data analysis. Qualitative data analysis is data analysis with reflection since data collections until all data is collected. The data analysis technique used in qualitative analysis has four stages, namely data collections, data reductions, data presentation, and the last step is drawing conclusion and verifications. The first is data reductions. Data reduction is a stage of qualitative data research technique. Data reduction is simplification, classifying, and removing unnecessary data in such a way that the data can produce meaningful information and make it easier to draw conclusions. The large amount of data and the complexity of data requires data analysis through the reduction stage. This reduction stage is carried out to select whether the data is relevant or not with the final goal. And for the second is data display. Data display or data presentation is also stage of qualitative data analysis techniques. Presentation of data is an activity when a collection of data is arranged systematically and easily understood. Thus, providing the possibility of generating conclusion, the firm presentation of qualitative data can be in the form of narrative text, in the form of default notes, metrics, graphs, and networks or charts. Through the presentation of the data will be organized and arranged in a relationships pattern so that it will be easier to understand. And so next is make conclusion and verifications. So drawing conclusion and verifying data is the final stage in qualitative data analysis. Data analysis techniques that are carried out to see the results of data reductions still refer to the analysis objectives to be achieved. This stage aims to find meaning of the data collected by looking for relationships, similarities, or differences to draw conclusion as answer to existing problems. The initial conclusion forwards are still temporary and may change if no supporting evidence is found at the next stage of data collection. But if the conclusion put forward at the final stage are supported by valid evidence, then the conclusion generated are credible conclusions. Verification is intended to show that the assessment of the stability of the data will the intent contained in the basic concept of the analysis is more precise and objective. One way this can be done by peer debriefing. So that's all my seminar, and thank you. So I give it back to the moderator.
All right. Thank you for Zelina. And the next session is the comments by the contributor. For the contributor one, time is yours.
Okay, thanks to moderator. I'm Devi Rusdiani as the first contributor for Zelin seminar proposal. I will give a comment for the Zelin proposal. Okay, overall, Zelin proposal is good and complete, but I will give comment in some parts. For the first, in the title section, the title that Zelin chose, in my opinion, is it is too general. It would be better if it was more specific so that it could make it easier for researchers to conduct research later. For example, the influence of adding or inserting humor in learning during a pandemic on the understanding of elementary school students in SDN 01 Bandar Buat. Then on the research background, I think Zelin can develop it further. For example, in the title, it says the influence of adding or inserting humor in learning during a pandemic, where it said that the research was appointed because of additional problems during the pandemic. Therefore, it will be better if the researcher more develop the pandemic condition as one of the reasons why this research was conducted in the background. And then as for the literature review, I think it is good because it has presented all the theories that will be used in this research. Maybe it just needs a little more development. And then in the research method section, I think it would be better if the research setting was determined, even though this was only a seminar exercise, because this is where we learn. And also with the research setting will make it easier for researchers to determine the next point, such as a research subject, research time and length, so that researchers can be more specific. And then in the research approach session, I think the researcher can write that the approach used is a qualitative approach with a descriptive type, for example. Then in the research instrumentation, in my mind, researchers cannot write research did not use a research instrument because they did not conduct research directly in the field. Because even though it is a qualitative research, the research instrument still exists. For example, the researcher is the instrument, and then the literature or the stationery and others, so that the researchers can explain it. Okay, that's all from me. I'm sorry for the mistakes. Thank you. I give it back to moderator.
Okay, thanks to Devi. So Devi has already comments about Zelina proposal, such as for the title, Devi said it is too general, and for research method, approach, and instrument, it is better to Zelina to write down the the place and the instrument. The next session is for contributor 2 to give comments. For contributor 2, time is yours.
Okay, thank you, moderator. I'm Adalah Rahma as the second contributor. Will give some critique and suggestion about Zelina proposal. Okay. Zelina proposal, I think it's good. And in the formulation of the problem and the chapter 2 and the chapter 3 is according with the title given by the author, namely the influence of adding or inserting humor in learning during a pandemic and in elementary school students. However, there are some critics for me. The first one is regarding the writing of the page should not include the page on the cover because it is not in accordance with the rules of writing scientific papers such as a proposal. And then in the setting of the proposal, Zelina not include the time of the proposal, but I think the time the proposal should be included so that the proposal can be better estimated. And the next, in the reference or bibliography, Zelina, I think, should use the news references, but in the Zelin proposal, there are old references such as 1917 or 1918 even 1915, and I think it's a very too old to include in the proposal source. And I think it's all about my comment. And thank you. I give back to the moderator.
Okay, thanks to Mawada as contributor 2. So Mawada also gives some comments such as the page number on the cover, the setting that Zelina should write down that time, and for reference, Zelina should use the news source. Okay, that's all for Zelina's presentation today. For the next, I'll give it to Miss Lena. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Who record this meeting, please stop the recording.